All right, welcome back in to the Coach Mark Gottfried Show. And I've said this many times, I've had some amazing guests. I've had Super Bowl winners and national champion coaches and actors and Emmy Award-winning actors. But today I'm as excited as anything because I've got not only a good friend from years and years ago, for so many years, but somebody I've always respected, and I just love him to death. I'm so honored, Sonny, to have you. This is Sonny Vaccaro. How you doing, Sonny?
I'm better now that I'm sitting with you and your audience. And I look forward to this. And as far as you're telling the audience way back. But I had more years to go way back than Mark does. So he was a teenager. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I want to introduce you, and I was thinking about this today, all the different ways I could introduce Sonny Vaccaro. So I would say, well, first of all, before any accolades, going back probably 30, almost 40 years now, but anyway, probably one of the most genuine, honest, authentic, trustworthy people I've ever met. He was the originator of a game that was called the Roundball Classic, or the Dapper Dan.
Yes.
And also probably I would say affected more lives in a positive way of young basketball players, all of the great ones, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady, LeBron James. You can go on and on and on. All those guys attended Sonny's basketball camps. Probably one of the most influential people in the game of basketball that I've known in my lifetime. Movie made about his life, and the movie called Air, the story of how Michael Jordan came to Nike, which was 100% because of Sonny Vaccaro. So I could go on and on, Sonny. What do you think? Author of an amazing book called Legends and Souls with Armand Katayan, who's one of the great writers we've ever had. And this book, Sonny, I've enjoyed it more than anything, but I don't really know how to introduce you because there's so many things I could talk about. Did I miss anything along the way?
And I happened to marry Pam, and she guided me through the second half of my life for sure. Mark, thank you for the accommodations, what we're doing now. Thank you for the opportunity. I can only say to you and to your audience that I've been a very lucky person my whole life. When you read the book, it uses the words improbable, almost impossible to believe that I would have this life starting in a small town in Western Pennsylvania 85 years ago. But to be honest and be truthful with the whole setting, one can't explain a lifetime of experiences without, leaving something out. So I like to start and I like to end my life with the memory of one thing. I owe the success of my adult life and the ideas that were to come later, other than my parents, my family, they obviously were the backbone of me, to the children of other parents and coaches that I never met. And they all had a sense of trust in me. And when I say the children, the parents would put their child on a bus or an airplane to fly to one of my events, or put them in a car and drive them to a camp that I had. Everything I had revolved around young people that I didn't know. And as I went through life, the greatest accomplishment I feel that I could, other than family, Mark, is that these people had faith in me to give me a life. I helped them, I hope. It always didn't end up good for the athlete or the person, and that's the equivalent of like we can't guarantee anything in life. But I have to say on your show to open it up, I'm not here today without those kids and those parents. What I was given a chance to do broadened my own personal world, my own psyche inside of me, because everything that I was able to do until this very moment, Mark, is something that was different than what I did. And as I went through actually, 65 years of dealing with young people, I have to say thank you, and opportunities like this help me. But also to your audience today, what I want to tell them, whatever Mark's going to ask me, or however the question's framed or whatever, I will be very honest about what I'm saying and what I'm doing. But I do want you to know that I'm one lucky person.
Well, I think there's a lot of lucky people that you've affected because of your influence on them. And I'm going to take everybody back, Sonny. So first of all, if you got a chance, for anybody that's listening or watching, Legends and Souls, it's a great read, and it tells so many stories. But, Sonny, I love the book, first of all. Congratulations. It's a fabulous book. But when I go back and think about, I first met you, I was at UCLA as an assistant coach, and I'm out recruiting, and I got to meet this bigger-than-life person in Sonny Vaccaro, and I was intimidated. I'd heard about you, and and you were involved with all these young, great basketball players throughout the years, and you've helped so many kids along the way. But the more I got to know you, Sonny, what stood out to me over the years is how authentic, how loving. You're loyal, you're honest, and we really kind of crossed a little bit our paths more when I was recruiting Felipe Lopez, a young kid that came from the Dominican who moved to New York City. But through all of my years, Sonny, and there's a lot of people that get involved in grassroots basketball that do it, to make money or to do it for their own glory. I've never one time felt that was you, ever. And so it's just a great tribute. But talk a little bit about maybe where that part of your character. I know you grew up in Pennsylvania, and I loved your story of growing up in Youngstown State and heading off to Fresno when you were young, and all those things. But that is such a part of you, that authentic piece of Sonny Vaccaro. I've loved it from day one. Where did that come from for you?
My family, my parents, because there was no reason to think in 1939 when I was born, just so your audience, when they read the first chapter, the first words in the book is when I was, when I'm September 23rd, 1939 born. My father was an immigrant. He went outside of the house that we were living in at the time, and he took his little gun out and he fired boom, 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 3 shots in the air. Now, I don't want the people to think my dad was shooting somebody. That was an Italian tradition. On the firstborn of that particular time, they celebrated the firstborn in the family. From there on in my life, for them, for my parents and my relatives, it was right before World War II started, and then the continuation of it all. Everyone in my family had gone to the war in one capacity or the other. My father didn't have to go because he had a job in a steel mill pouring the liquid into to make the steel to make the guns and the boats and all that, so he got deferred. But to fast forward on, Mark, and to get to where your point was, I never dreamed that at an early age, and from where we came from, that the future was in front of me, that I had no clue. Everything was improbable. I never thought I'd go to college. No one ever went to college in our city. That was a natural thing in the 40s, in the early days. First generation, second generation didn't get a chance to go to college for a lot of reasons. But Sonny Vaccaro, I was a pretty good athlete at that time in a small town. I was good enough to be given offers of scholarships, but I never thought I, would go to college. So to tell your readers right now, there are 53 students in our graduating class. I graduated third from the bottom of my class. So there was never in there that I thought I was going to. I always wanted to play for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and at that time, even being in the minor leagues was a major thing. That was my dream, nothing else. But I, like others in life, and especially early on, something happens to you that you can't expect. I was going to go to college for a football scholarship to University of Kentucky. On the way there to Kentucky, I was derailed. because I didn't have the grades. Even in 1957, I guess they kept things. So they sent me to a junior college for a year so I could bring my grades up. So I went across the first time on an airplane. Me and two of my buddies went to Reedley, California, which is right outside of Fresno, on an airplane for the first time in my life, 3,000 miles away. When we got there, this is now 1958. My friend Joey was Serbian. My other companion, my other teammate was Jimmy, who was black, and there was Sonny, the Italian. And the first thing I noticed once I was there, after the grapes and everything, the raisins, everything, I noticed I was out of a life-centering situation. My teammates were Hispanic or Japanese. That's what they were. Now, if you go to Reedley, they mostly were. Our quarterback was a Hispanic guy named Danny Villanueva. He was Hispanic. He played for the Dallas Cowboys for 13 years as a kicker. The best player on our team was Larry Ursaki. He was Japanese. This is right after war. So it's a culture shock. So I go to Reedley. I do good things, I guess, and I look like I'm going to go to Kentucky, except I got injured at Reedley. And it wasn't a good injury because I had this previous to me in high school, but it sort of went away. Kentucky did what schools always used to do. I lost my scholarship, or the coach wasn't really interested in Sonny Vaccaro again. I had to make a decision. What did I do? Well, I remember I had scholarships from University of West Virginia and Youngstown State. Youngstown State's Division 2 today, I guess, whatever. But they had a program. I want to hurry up for your audience here. So I write a letter to the football coach at Youngstown, and he remembers me. It's a letter. I'm still at Reedley when I do this, and I write him, and he tells me, John, I remember you. Will you come? I'll take you. I'll take one more chance. Now I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to give you the improbable thing. While I was in high school, I never was going anywhere. Remember, I just told you that. And I was going to play for the Pirates or this thing. I wasn't do that. I had a lady who was our guidance counselor. I told you I graduated third from my bottom for this reason. I never knew Mrs. Giglio. We were a small school. I knew her name. There was never any way for me to think I was going to, guidance counselors either send you to a college somewhere, or you work in the Westinghouse and get a job in corporate or something like that. Well, I knew who she was. And one day she came to me. I was the captain of a football team for the last 2 years, my junior and senior year, and I always had to make a speech. And on the final day of our season, tomorrow we're playing our big rivals down the street, down the road. And I gave another speech, and it would have been my last speech. And that particular night, Mrs. Giglio was chaperoning the dance. And here's where the fate's in. And she comes over to me and says, Sonny, I noticed what you've done, bye. I see your last year. I'd like to ask you a question. Do you know what you're going to do? Why don't you go to college? Because, she knew I was, and I said, well, Mrs. Giglio, you know why. I don't have any grades. She said, well, let me tell you something. What? You have a gift. What is my gift? I have a gift. Okay. You can really speak. Mark, as God is my judge today, she said that to me, 60, 70 years ago. And as you know, I love to speak, and I'm doing a national show, and I'm doing other things. And it never entered my mind that would be a turning point in my life. Because that lady told me I could do something that I never thought I could do. And as I migrated, I went to Youngstown. I graduated from Youngstown. I used to pick up kids locally because I couldn't play football anymore. They made me, because I got hurt at Youngstown, I'm sorry. So the basketball coach, Don Roselli, liked my attitude. And he said, I like something about you. And they would recruit smaller level kids. And they never got in West Virginia. He said, do you think you can get me some basketball players? I'm going to keep you on scholarship. Dyke wants to keep you on because you take these kids around in the winter or the springtime to Sharon, to Braddock White, Allentown. I see you have all these teams from Western Pennsylvania. And I said, yeah, I think so. I'll stay. That started my basketball life. Until then, I never thought I would do that. All I wanted to do was be the football coach at Trafford. Now I'm on my way. I'm saved. Another improbable thing. I go to Trafford. I'm going to be the assistant football coach. I'm there. I always wanted to be the head coach. A strange thing happened right there. Another turn in my life. Lanny Van Eman, who you'll know the name, was from McKeesport, Pennsylvania. He was a great, great athlete. McKeesport's double A. They were the biggest schools in the state of Pennsylvania, and I was a Class B school. And he was one of the best players ever to play at Wichita. Okay, he played with Dave Stallworth in those years. I don't know if your audience can remember all that, but Lanny was recruiting, and he saw what I was doing, and he liked me. And there was a kid from Trafford named Tony Morocco he was a good player at my high school also. And Ralph gave him a scholarship. And then Lanny came to me one day, and Coach Miller said he can tell me something. What? Ask Sonny, Mr. Vaccaro, if he'd like to go to graduate school. And if he does, we'll give him a graduate school scholarship. All of a sudden, I quit coaching. This before I was coaching, because that's what I was going to do, because I wasn't there yet. And I went to graduate school at Wichita under Ralph Miller, one of the greatest coaches in the world. My life started to turn. I get past that. I come back to Trafford. I'm done with the trend, and I have an idea. I'm an assistant coach at Trafford High School football and basketball team, the assistant coach. I had an idea, because I was taking those kids around the eastern part of the state to play these tournaments from Pittsburgh. I know these kids are pretty darn good. We kept winning some tournaments and all that. And I said to my friend, Pat DeCesar, a boyhood friend who grew up to be very successful in the music world, and you'll find out in a minute, Mark, and in your audience. I said, Pat, I have an idea. I have no money, but I had an idea. What is it, Sonny? Why don't we have an all-star game of the best players in Pennsylvania against the rest of the players in America? Well, basketball wasn't a big thing in Western Pennsylvania. We were good, but it was all football. Football. We had the greatest football players in the world. Ohio, the eastern part of America was no question about it. Joe Namath and all those guys. And I said, no, I think we can do it. I said, I said, how are you going to find a players? Well, I know most of them in Western Pennsylvania, and I can drive around in Philadelphia, but I'll look in a book. I'll find you the players. There are books out, that give you the Parade Magazine All-American and all that stuff. This is 1964. I'm talking to Pat. He said, oh, I forgot to tell your audience. Pat DeCesar, 1 year ahead of me, my kumbadi in Trafford, loved music. He was working with one of the big promoters at that time in a minor capacity. Wasn't like a partner, but he was involved in music for a guy named Tim Torme. And Tim Torme and Pat, with a small and little investment, put some dollars in it, brought the Beatles to the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania Civic Arena when it first opened in 1985, or 1984. And that arena was born. And Pat said, we're going to get a sponsor. And I called the Post-Gazette, the Dapper Dan Club. That's how the Dapper Dan Roundball Classic started. We now put the game in. Pat guarantees all the money. I had no money again, ladies and gentlemen. We played there. The first All-Star game ever done, 13 years ahead of McDonald's, which they're celebrating this week. 13 years, Mark. 10,336 people show up. Well, the history is now to begin with Sonny Vaccaro.
That's right.
So that's how I got there. Improbable route, impossible turns. Didn't have 5 cents, but always had someone who believed in me. And then this time, my buddy Pat DeCesar. And Pat grew up to be one of the biggest rock promoters in America as his life is. He's still living, thank God. So, Mark, that takes me to that first journey that then led me to running a summer camp in Western Pennsylvania, to meeting a young kid one day at my summer camp. And we're walking up the hill. Out of nowhere, this kid says, Mr. Vaccaro. He says, can I talk to you? Sure. Charlie. I'll call him Charlie. Yeah, I said, what can I do? Mr. Vaccaro, I got these shoes on, and they're tennis shoes. And I get embarrassed because, I wear these everywhere. He was telling me that the tennis shoes he was wearing, he wore to church, to school, and he's wearing them at the summer camp. Is there any way they can make tennis shoes that like we can wear out like after? And I said, I don't know nothing. This is before anything in the shoe world. But this kid gave me an idea that come to fruition years later. I forgot Charlie. I went on. I quit doing that camp. I started doing other things because I knew all the kids in the Roundball Classic, the great ones. I actually was hired by the new league in town no professional basketball league. The new one was, what the heck was the new one where they had all the guys leaving, Mark? There wasn't the NBA, okay?
The ABA.
The ABA, okay? They were just starting, American Basketball Association League, and I knew all these kids, and they played in the round ball. I actually was flown on, plane to New York, naturally, and people had seen me, and the president of the ABA had me in his office. He said, Mr. Vaccaro, we'd like to hire you. What the heck can I do? Well, we know you know all these kids. It was the ABA, the first years they're starting. We're going to give you a job if you can introduce our scouts to these players in college. Now, they had no age limit like the NBA. They started right out of, birth if you were ready for the ABA. Now, I said, well, I can do that. Are you listening? For every player we get, we'll give you $3,000, and that's the last of it, though. You introduce us, and we sign them. All they had to do was sign them. I started making a tour of all the kids. I'm Dana Lewis and all these guys, Larry Cannon, all these kids that played in the Dapper Dan. I knew them, so they told me where to go. I went, I took the scout with me, and we did pretty good the first year. They got 5 of the kids that I recommended. I made $15,000, like $15 million in 1969, 70. This is how this is going, this story. I'm now working for the ABA. I'm reading. While I'm working for the ABA, on my own then, because I'm done doing that, I get a call from a football player that I got a scholarship from Trafford to Eastern Michigan. He went to Eastern Michigan to play football on scholarship, and he was pretty good at it. And I got a call one day from him. His name was Jackson Nunn, and he said, Sonny, we got a kid here in trouble. They just kicked him off the team. And, I said, what do you want me to do, Jackson? And he said, well, if you know everybody, there's this new league. He said, can you introduce them? I said, well, what's his name? Who is he? George Gervin. Well, I heard about George. He didn't play in the Dapper Dan, but he was a great high school player. He was going to go play for Target Long Beach. I do remember that. But I drove to Detroit to meet George Gervin from Pittsburgh, like 300 miles. Didn't know him. Him and his high school coach and their dog, the Doberman, Bruno, was waiting for me at the door. I drive all the way, and I meet George and his high school coach, Willie Merriweather. And from there, they trust me. I know the people were running the franchise in Carolina, and I call the owner. I make reservations. We fly George Gervin down. I drive from Pittsburgh. He flies from Detroit. He signs the contract. I signed George Gervin. This is all unbelievable. Now I'm into the other world. Okay, so Mark, I don't know if you want me to continue and you have some questions, but that got me to, eventually it's going to get me to Nike and the rest of my life. How improbable was this first 10 minutes of this particular show I'm doing with you? Nothing was planned. Nothing.
Well, what amazes me, Sonny, is if you go back to the Dapper Dan and the round ball and all the best players in the country in Pennsylvania, but around the country, but then just to kind of bring it up to speed for the listeners, you're talking about developing relationships with the biggest names there's ever been in basketball. Some of our listeners won't remember some of the players from the 70s and so forth, but when you start talking about Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and the list goes on and on and on and on, there's 100 of them. It's not just those guys. But your vision to start that All-Star game, which then led to the ABA, which then led to, which I'm very interested, I'd love to hear your story. I've read about it, but I want to hear about it, about you then with those relationships, and you've established yourself now as a guy that, one, can evaluate talent, and two, you have relationships with so many people now in the basketball world. Now it leads to Phil Knight and Nike, and the opportunity then for you to go and work at Nike. What was that like at the very, very beginning for you? Like walking in the doors and here's this upstart shoe company. Talk a little bit about that, Sonny.
Well, it wasn't traumatic. It was brand new. It was another one. It was like me getting on that plane to go to Reedley, 10 years before that. It was the same thing, Mark. I was going into an environment that I knew nothing about. I obviously didn't know anything about. I used to call Nike, Nicky. That's how I never knew how to pronounce it. They became interested in me because I had a friend of mine design a shoe that Charlie, remember Charlie on the hill with the thing? When he said that, I said to myself, that he has something. This is 4 or 5 years later now. Now we're into, 1976 or something. And so that's what I'm saying. There was this goal or this gap in my life where I was representing some players and doing that with George and some other people. They invite me out there because they know somebody, an agent, Louis Chaffel and Jerry Davis, major agents. They had, 25% of the NBA great players at that time. They were friends of mine because of that relationship I made with other agents. And I got them to get me an appointment. I asked Jerry Davis if there was anything around, and Nike was just starting, and he had a client that was wearing Nikes. They wrote me a letter of introduction to Phil Knight. They arranged for me to fly out there and let me show them what my shoemaker friend in Trafford made to change everything. That's why I even went there. I never would have gone there unless Charlie would have said something about the shoes. To get fast forward, we went out there. I brought, 8 shoes with me in a burlap sack, that we had back there, potato sacks we used to call them then. And I had my shoes. They interviewed me, Phil Knight and the whole thing. And Rob Strasser was the key guy. Rob Strasser, the genius of Nike marketing. And as I go through my life and the book shows it very. But what I want to tell your audience, Mark, is that's how I got there. They bring me out to look at what my Bobby DiRinaldo, my shoemaker in Trafford, made for me. They did for a thing. They took me to a Chinese restaurant for dinner. They kept my shoes. I never saw those shoes again, ever. They kept them. I never did them because something else happened. Now they're talking to me, and they want to get involved with basketball. They had one college, Oregon, wearing the shoe, and Phil Knight went to Oregon, just so we know. And the track coach there was partnered with Phil Knight, okay? So this was all unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. Here I am, but then Strausser and I had a conversation, and there were 7 people that day, and they said, what can we do to get involved in basketball? I said, well, come to the Dapper Dan. See what I'll tell you what I can do. I can't tell you this. Why don't you come to the Dapper Dan and see what I've done, why I'm even here. That's how I met those guys in the first place. Rob Strasser flies to Pittsburgh, never was there before, comes to the game. At that time, it was Albert King's year, okay, and Gerald and Banks and all those guys, 77, I believe. Well, we enlarged the Civic Arena that we told we had, right, ladies and gentlemen? Now there's 17,000 people. They enlarged it. Strasser comes to see that Dapper Dan that year in 77. I was just there this only 1 year now I met them. That was like the fall, now it's the spring. And he sees all these coaches. At one time, I know in the first year, there were over 200 coaches in the stands because we had a great preliminary game also, Mark, for the local kids, the Catholic leagues and the city leagues out of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was feeding athletes in those years. Great town. So Strasser comes. He loves it. He takes the morning plane out the next morning on Saturday. He watches the game practice Saturday morning shoot-arounds, blah, blah, blah. Now, He gives me a call. Phil wants to see you. Mr. Knight wants to see you. Come on out. Oh, I didn't tell you. The first time I spent my own dime. I spent my own dime to go there with my knapsack. Well, that happens. They bought my ticket. I go out and I tell them, they ask me what I can do. And here's what your audience should listen to, because it's part of what a later story is about athletes. I said, pay the coaches. Phil Knight said, what do you mean pay the coaches? Pay the coaches. You pay the coaches. Let them do a clinic for you or do whatever the hell you do. And the kids will wear the shoes. He said, what do you mean? Well, the kids are going to get nothing. We're going to, they're buying shoes and we're going to give them the sweatsuits. We're going to give them T-shirts for their camps. We're going to do all these. And I said, I give the money. I swear to God, audience, I said to Phil Knight that first day, I'd give it right to the players, but we're not allowed because of the NCAA. And as we see 50 years later, Mark, how the world has changed, right? But they caused their own problem. That's how it started. I said, pay the coaches. Well, I paid the coaches. Inside, they had one thing. By 1984, when you had all four teams in the finals down in Kentucky someplace, right? All four Nike teams, okay? That's when Rollie beat John in that final there, okay? It went off the wall. And all that begat Michael Jordan. Because until then, they had some very good pro guys. George was one of them, Moses Malone. But it was a different world. Pro basketball wasn't loved. The finals were tape delayed on the East Coast. A lot of drugs. All these things were happening, and the NBA wasn't the NBA today then. And then I'm pretty successful. Nike's doing wonderful, but they hit a wall on a whole new thing with the styles of the shoes. We now come to do, how are we going to spend $250,000? And they invite me to a meeting that I never went to before. I had nothing to do with the pros until the Jordan meeting. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, and this is what I want to make sure everybody understands. And so just like you've mentioned, Sonny, back then, and this is what I've always admired about you, you were such a forward thinker. Like you were thinking about things that nobody else was thinking about. And even the fact that you go back to those early days at Nike and the college coaches at that time, with Jerry Tarkanian at UNLV and John Thompson at Georgetown and Raleigh Massimino and Jim Valvano at NC State. And there was a lot of them. There was, you had a lot of those guys. But, to get a university to pay the coach, and the coach would do clinics. But, then that university, they started wearing the shoes. All of a sudden, the brand there was an awareness of Nike that in the world of basketball that wasn't really there. It was never there. So even that vision, Sonny, that you had to do that, nobody else was doing it. You were way out in front of everybody, and you elevate the brand. And like you mentioned, now it comes to the time where, Nike had been kind of spreading some money around to the pro players and, giving a handful of players some money. But all of a sudden, Sonny Vaccaro, and here's where I want you to tell the story, Sonny. You kind of have a different twist. You said, we ought to give all the money in our budget, all of the money, to one guy. And that one guy was Michael Jordan. Talk about that a little bit, Sonny, because you had to know in your gut, you had to be convicted when you watched him that he was worth that, because they had never done that before.
They nor anybody else had ever just got one, Mark. So yes, it was completely the most confusing thing in my life, because I had no desire to even think. I saw Michael Jordan one time in my life before that meeting, one time. And that time was when they played Georgetown in '81, and they beat Georgetown. That's he did not play in the Dapper Dan. Michael wasn't the high school player of the year in the state of North Carolina. A lot of people don't know that, okay? North Carolina were Converse their whole life. So he didn't know anything. And he certainly didn't know Sonny Vaccaro. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, gospel truth. I'm watching the game. It comes down to 18 seconds. If you all saw Air, you're seeing what I'm talking about. It all comes down to 18 seconds. Georgetown may win this game. All we got to do is stop this shot, get the rebound. They're either going to get fouled or we're going to run out the darn clock. I didn't give a damn about Michael Jordan. I didn't know his name until he took the shot. What they all have to understand, and I'm going to tell you right to your ears and eyes, ladies and gentlemen, watching this. He makes the shot. Georgetown gets the ball. We dribble it down, and then Freddie throws it to the wrong guy, and they lose.
Yeah.
That was my whole dream, was have the Nike team again win a championship, the national championship, and and all these sort of things. All these things were great. I swear to God Almighty, ladies and gentlemen, I never thought about Michael again in my life until I met him at the Tony Romas 3 years later. I wanted Georgetown to win. That's all I remember. What happened that day, if you saw Air, the script where you show the movie, that Matt shows the movie, was the easiest way to show it to an audience. They can't just say, well, you watched the damn kid and you forgot about him for 3 years. They had to say that I was brilliant. I looked at that film. Somewhere in my psyche, because I was told this by, I don't want to say a doctor, I want to think I'm crazy, but I asked people, why did that come out of my mouth? That was probably the first time I said that name for whatever reason in 3 years at least. I mean, I didn't care about him. They didn't win the championship that year, Mark. North Carolina did not win the championship. Michael's junior year, people forget. They think he won every championship. He won the championship in 81. So there was no good feelings about me and Mike. So I say to you, it was a gift. It's something I've been able to do. And you mentioned the other kids later on. There's no explanation for it. I don't have a pattern. I can't write a book about here's what you do when you got an idea. No. What you do when you have an idea, follow through on it. But anyway, Mark and audience, that's how it happened. The biggest accident in the world. Oh, no, Charlie was. Oh, no, Mrs. Julia was. All these improbable things come out of my life nowhere.
Well, Sonny, when I think about it, and obviously I wasn't there, but, you're the reason that Michael Jordan is in Nikes. I don't care what anybody says. I know the story, and I know you, and I know your heart. But to me, Sonny, and I've watched this over the years with you, and I've sat at Fairleigh Dickinson at the ABCD camp many years. I've been to all your camps when I coached, and I watched these young guys like Kobe Bryant and Tracy McGrady and LeBron James come to your camp. And I can only imagine, Sonny, that it's probably underappreciated by Phil Knight. I'll say it. You don't have to say it. In that your ability to develop a relationship with the families and the kids where there's so much trust. And I watched it. I've watched this for years. I watched how kids trusted you and their families trusted you because they knew you didn't have any agenda other than to try to help them. And I can only imagine that was part of Michael Jordan and his mother, father, as they got to know you. And there's value in that, in my view. And I've watched it 100 times with you. That had to be a part at the end of the day. I mean, money's money. We all understand, but there had to be such a great relationship built between you and Michael and his family. Would you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. I stayed at Michael's home. I traveled to Europe with Michael. I made his first camp with him. We did a special for him on NBC, a salute to Michael Jordan. I did everything with Michael. His birthday is the same day as my wife's, Pam. Okay, we celebrated birthday together. We actually had one party in Las Vegas where Michael and his friends and Pammy and I, we were all there at the same time. The biggest mystery in my life is how people just don't stop and think, where's the hell is the logic here? I traveled the world. I got every picture in the world with arguably one of the greatest athletes ever to play. But those sort of things Mark, go with what the world has turned into also. When you asked me about the faith and the goodwill I had with other kids, I can say to you, when you look at LeBron's family, I knew LeBron's family. I knew his mother well. I get to know the people, and they get to know Pam and I. And that's a judgment that you go through life doing. So it's not an amazing thing. It's something that should just be a natural thing for others to do. But the hardest part of just continuing on at this time, when I wrote this book that you're holding up for me, Mark, is I had to take whatever breath God gives me left, the last breath of my life, and I hope I get a few more. I had to tell the story my way. I'm not afraid of anything in that book, Mark. Not afraid. I want them who doubted me, who misrepresented who I am and what I've done. I would like them to answer the questions that I'm saying in here. I'm not calling anyone names. I'm not saying anything. I'm just telling the world, this is the world of Sonny Vaccaro. If you think I did good, read it. You'll learn one thing. You'll learn that don't ever give up on yourself. And if you believe in yourself, you have a hell of a lot better chance of having a successful life. And if you let people push you around, and I know most people can't be who I was or in a position because I am a public figure, but you can do it anywhere. Just believe in yourself. Don't lie. But that some of the stories that this book relates to, Mark, have been told with a twisted tongue. Okay? I'm not going to let it. Go ahead. You. I know we're on a clock here.
Well, Sonny, let me ask you this question, because, again, when I go back, even when I was a young assistant coach, and I can imagine, because you had become such a trusted figure in basketball, and people were probably recommended, oh, hey, Sonny, I've got this good kid. He's a 9th grader. He's a 10th grader. He's got this. I can only imagine how many phone calls and recommendations you would get to have people come to your camp. But I personally remember watching a young Kobe Bryant in your camp, a young Tracy Murray in your camp, those guys when they were young.
Yeah.
And a lot of those guys, they weren't household names back then. They were young kids that were just trying to, make their mark. And, I love the story in your book when Kobe's father, I think it was, introduced you maybe to a young Kobe. But you had to have so many of those, Sonny, where people were, recommending all these kids to you, and you had kind of built a good group of people around the country that could recommend guys, but that probably had to be a little hard for you too, trying to sort out, okay, who's really good, who's not, until your eyes saw them. And then once you saw them, it was like, oh, okay, I can see like a young Kobe. I see that potential, but you had to have a million people trying to reach out to you all the time. Is that accurate?
That's much better said than a lot of people asking that question. Yeah, well, just to your audience real quick, Mark, is when I first started ABCD, I had 120 kids. That's what we were working for. The first couple of years, 120, and would divide up teams, 12 teams, 10, something, whatever. It was all planned out. Well, when we got to state Tracy McGrady in whatever year that was, Mark, I don't know if you remember his senior year. In fact, the title of his chapter is 175 to 1. Tracy McGrady that year was the last player I picked because people in his hometown just kicked his butt and said he was a bad kid. His family was not the salt of the earth, the other thing, and everything. And I'll never forget, I had this call from his high school coach forbidding me. And I had another call. And my wife, Pam, she knew all the kids because she ran the camps after a while. And she comes to me after we hear all this stuff, and she says, Sonny, you've never turned down a kid because other people, what I've done over all the years, I believe, is keep adding to the guys unless something was proven, unless we knew that you did something wrong. I had a lot of MVPs in the game, in the Magic game, it turned out to be from the Dapper Dan, didn't end up well. that want everything. But it had nothing to do with who they were at that time. I like to say to you and others and the people that read the book, I like to tell them, you can't judge somebody by other people's opinions. Make it yourself. Don't, I don't want to say crucify. Don't criticize others unless there's value, that there's proof. Because we're going through a world today, and I'm not getting into politics, where it's hard to trust anybody saying anything. You have to do your own fishing. How about that? I never said that, Mark. Do your own fishing. And if, whatever you pull out, and if you believe in them, give them a chance.
Well, so I've watched it, Sonny, so many times. I want you to talk about this real quick, and we're going to go a little longer if that's okay, because there's so much to talk about with you. But here's an interesting one, and a lot of people in life, adversity hits us, tough times happen, tough things happen to us, and in all different kind of ways. And I've been fired as a coach, and it hurts, it's bad, it's hard. But for you, I look at you, Sonny, and I go, okay, he's at Nike. And for those that are listening, Sonny was with Nike, later was with Adidas. There was nobody that had more influence over young high school players than Sonny Vaccaro. But you're at Nike, you're with Phil Knight and the group there. You've got Michael Jordan. The Nike brand is blowing up in basketball. It's off the charts. You've got all these coaches around the country that are endorsing Nike. And then one day it comes to your attention and you fly to Portland and Phil Knight decides that we're going to move on from Sonny Vaccaro. And I know, Sonny, for me, when that's happened in my life, it hurts so bad, but then we all have to kind of get up after it. But talk about that and part of your life. There's been so many amazing things, but you turned that situation into a positive. But talk a little bit about that and how that affected you at that time.
Ladies and gentlemen, just so I clarify for Mark, I had done everything. When I went to visit to see Phil on that particular day, it was only 1 week after we had at the Broadmoor Hotel, the Nike trip, where I'd invite 60 or 70 of the coaches. And we've been doing that for 20 some years. And Michael was there with me because Michael at that time didn't want to come because it was always, that late in the year. And he has only a couple more days and he's going to go to spring training and all that. To sign over with Magic Johnson, his name, image, and likeness, he wanted to get away from it. Him and Magic were going to do it. Michael did not want to come. We had just come back from Europe. I spent 10 days, Pam and I, traveling Europe with Michael. So that whole month I was like with Michael. Now we're with the Broadmoor. Now I go home. Now I'm invited up to Phil's office next week, which I think was next week. Okay. And I think we're going to go over, it's been a great year. We just come back. It was a great year. And I go up and I get picked up by the guy that I actually gave his first job to at Nike, Ed Janka. He picked me up in the car and he drives me, and like he had for years, he's now working for Nike and working with all the things I did. And I go into the meeting and Phil's sitting on his, I don't think he's on the floor at that time, but anyway, he's sitting in a chair and he has a bunch of papers on a thing. I'm not there 5 minutes. And the reason I was brought in, not to go over next year's budget or whatever, he wanted to tell me he was letting me go. It was the biggest shock in my life at that time, professional shock. I've lost too many people to say that, but professional shock. It was completely out of nowhere. And I knew nothing about, I wasn't warned or anything. And so I'll just say this right to your audience. When he says that, I say to him, as the kid from Trafford would say way back ago, screw you, you can't fire me, I quit. Well, I was being that kid. right there. Because anybody with common sense would know, all right, he fires you, you're going to make compensation here. We're going to do a deal or whatever. I mean, not just going to throw me on the street. But he had all those things for him. This year, I owed him some money, this and that and that. We got to do all this, and he owed me this. I leave. I go home. My wife, it's a holy day. She's in church that day. And I tell her what happens. She can't believe it. We go home. My phone is off the hook. Already, people know that I've been let go. Already, the flight from here down, same night, same day. And I didn't even get a chance to tell anybody, including Michael. He was the first call on there, him and his wife. To tell you in any uncertain words, when I found out years later that Knight told all the hierarchy at Nike 2 days before I was fired that he was firing me. I had no clue. And only because after all the years, and the man who told me I only met one time in my life, he was a guy that I wouldn't have known. He ran another department. I met him once. And then I started getting other calls and other calls and other calls. And my friend, and I don't want to talk about him, he's passed away, so anyway, the guy that picked me up, he knew, everybody knew, except Pam and I. So to sit here and go over all the things in life that shouldn't happen to you and hurts when it does happen to you, it's not because you did something wrong. It was about somebody just wanted to get rid of you. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. He just could have said, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. It's over. What the hell could I have said? Nothing. Right. I just said, okay.
Right. I hope Sonny, the part of that story that I like the most is because I think for all of us, well, everybody in life, it's when you get these tough blows, like that had to be a tough blow for you because you had done so much for Nike, but then you turn around a couple years later and you start in with Adidas, which at that time and really still to this day is really the biggest rival, Nike and Adidas. And Nike at the time was struggling. I mean, Adidas was struggling. They didn't have the momentum at that point, in my view. But you took a tough situation that happened in your life, and then you turned it and you rebounded. I mean, it showed your resiliency. Talk about that a little bit, about how, you're at Nike, boom, and all of a sudden, here we go. You're at the competitor. You're at Adidas.
Well, by that time, and before I had left, before I got fired, Rob Strasser and Peter Moore left Nike to take over Adidas America. Yeah. So my two partners, my life givers, Peter and Rob were, in my book. I just pay testimony to both of them. Peter made the logo, ladies and gentlemen, in case some of you don't know, and Rob was the marketing genius. I was the guy with the ideas, I guess. And they bought it. And they asked me, by that time I'm fired. Pam and I are doing well. I'm representing a couple of athletes. I did the car deal. I started getting guys thing. I did things with Mutombo. We made a living. And also my wife was very, very successful in her world. She was a commercial actress. We were okay. I never thought. And Rob said to me, they were in New York and they wanted me to fly in. Very few people get a chance to climb the same mountain twice. We're going to do it. Come and join us. I do. Rob dies within 9 months of him buying it. Peter becomes president. Peter was a great, what he did, the shoes and all the things, the legend in the world. But he wasn't Rob in that sense, and everyone knows it, and Peter knew that. And I go there, and I got to find the next Michael. That's why. And that's how Kobe Bryant came into my life. I knew Kobe's father was the MVP of the Dapper Dan Roundball Classic. Kobe's mother had her brother played in the 1972 game. So mom and dad gave birth to this child that there was athletic skills were ingrained in that, buddy. I don't know all this. I have no clue that Kobe's. I know about Joe. I mean, he was drafted in the first round, played about 6-7 years, went to Europe. I knew that. I knew it. So now, where the camp comes, and I get a visit from Joe and Pam Bryant, and they're bringing the young 16-year-old or 15-year-old. He's only going to be a junior now. And it was the first time I met him. First time I saw Joe, I never met Pam because she didn't come to the Dapper Dan, obviously. But since the Dapper Dan in 71. And he want to introduce you to my son. And it's Jelly Bean's kid. That's the name of the thing. Jelly Bean was Joe's nickname. He introduced me to his son, Kobe. I don't know if Kobe can walk, talk, or chew gum at the same time. Okay. But I put him in camp. Camp's over, ladies and gentlemen. 5 days. 5 days. We have an junior all-star game and senior all-star game. They play each other. And comes over, and Kobe comes running over to me and gives me a hug and says, "Thank you, Mr. Vaccaro, I can almost perfect, what he said, inviting me to camp. But I'm disappointed. I'm got to do. What's wrong, Kobe?" Well, I didn't want to say this, but he said this. He said, "Mr. Vaccaro, I'm coming back next year, and I'm going to be the MVP at the whole camp." Now, this is the 16-year-old kid. After he's there, nobody at camp knew him. He was known in Philadelphia that summer. They knew he could play, but he didn't get invited to the other camps because if you remember then, Nike had a camp, now it's the Adidas camp now. I mean, everyone has camps, right? Michael Jordan might have had his camp. I think Michael even had his at that time. So anyway, Mark, that kid tells me that. Obviously, he turns out to be great. But I knew that statement made Pam and I forgot to tell you, Peter Moore moved me to New York for 9 months because I said, I have to be in New York. I have to be in the basketball. I can't stay in Las Vegas or Los Angeles. I got to go back here. They rented me a very nice apartment, Pam and I. It was a great experience. And I covered it with, as you know, you go to New York, you meet everybody. And sports goes through New York, no matter what the game is. So there I was, there Joe was. If that doesn't happen, that doesn't happen. But that kid told me that. That kid told me, I'm going to be the MVP. That's the Kobe Bryant I signed and turned Adidas around to 6 years, turned them around. Then he left on his own and left to go. And then what we have is number 175 the year after, Tracy McGrady. Damn, that's pretty damn good.
That's better than pretty damn good, Sonny. And I was at the camp. I can remember watching Kobe as a young person, and I just fell in love with his game. Like he had a little something in him to me that reminded me of Jordan. Even as they became pros, they had a drive and a mental kind of toughness that I don't know if there's been a lot of people that have had it, but I think those two have it. Were you able to kind of see that yourself a little bit with Kobe? I know you had been with Michael, but with Kobe, could you see it?
Oh my God, yes. But I'll give you a good one on there for your audience. Okay, I don't know if I put this in the book. True story. Yeah, I knew that. I mean, yes, I think so. Not that I'm trying to impress you, but I'm going to tell you why I really know it now, right? Because this actually happened. It was his rookie year. They were playing in the playoffs. They were, I don't know who the heck it was, in Denver or someplace, okay? They were coming, so this game, everybody in Los Angeles is going to remember it. It was the last game of the series or whatever the last game, who they were playing, okay? And they got their butt kicked, okay? But Kobe got to play because they were way behind. And he took a shot, and he took another shot, and he missed them. He missed them. He was having a horrible day. This is what I'm trying to tell your audience, Mark. He's coming home. I called him a lot of the time, especially after I'd call because Joe, his driver, would pick him up and drive him because he only lived on top of the same hill we lived in. We lived on Pacific Palisades, the one that got all burned down. I lived in the middle of the street, Pam and I. Kobe and his family was talking. So they had asked me to pass our house. We visited him on that ride back. Kobe, what the hell are you doing taking those shots? And he said, can I say something? Okay. And he said, damn it, Sonny, those goddamn guys wouldn't take the shot. I'm going to shoot it. I'll never forget that. He said that on the, coming off the airplane. And I said, why did you take them? He said, no one else wanted to shoot. That was Kobe Bryant. That was Kobe Bryant. Yeah, I'm going to be the most valuable player. You guys don't want to shoot? I'll shoot it. What the hell? That's who he was. That's who he was. That's why he'll be remembered forever. That's why he's Mamba. I mean, I watched that. All those little things that I was able to see, he was. So, Mark, let me do this, okay? There's all these things today, and everyone gets in arguments about. I don't have an opinion of picking the greatest guy. I go back and who's better than Wilt? Who's better than Bill? Who's better all? They're all great in their time. Let's just let it alone.
Yeah.
But if you ask me who I spend time with, there's only a few of them. And obviously Michael's one of them. And this is not a negative thing. The one I would, if I had to make a $10 bet at my brother's casino, I would say I would pick Kobe. I don't think, and I think Michael obviously did this. And Michael, this is not negative to Michael, but what I saw on the personal level at such a young age, I didn't see in Michael. I knew this was Kobe, I think, from that first day. And remember now, we're talking about an 18 or a 19-year-old kid flying that plane. This isn't Michael Jordan, as he goes through life. This is not about Michael being, but I saw it in him at 17 and 18 years old. He didn't give a damn. He didn't give a damn.
Amazing. There's a documentary for people that aren't aware of it, and it's called The Dominican Dream. And I think it's on Disney or one of them. It's an unbelievable documentary. I loved it to death because it centers around a young guy named Felipe Lopez and his family. They had come from the Dominican. They went to New York City, and shortly thereafter, his kind of stardom started to rise within the city and in the Dominican population. But it's another family, Sonny, that I think, well, I know for sure because I recruited Felipe. I recruited him really hard. I fell in love with him as a young guy, big smile, loved him to death. But another family that really trusted you. They really trusted your guidance and your opinions because they were trying to navigate, they're in a whole new country and basketball, and all of a sudden he's becoming bigger than life. He's on Sports Illustrated. Talk a little bit about your relationship with Felipe because, I saw it firsthand and I knew it. And again, how a family just trusted you. Talk a little bit about that with Felipe.
That was the nicest and the easiest because they basically were looking for a friend in that world. I was the outsider. I wasn't the high school coach. I wasn't, the guy that ran the AAU team. I wasn't someone who was, at that time, signing them to go to Nike or Adidas or whoever it was, and in the year it was, I was looking at a kid who was, came to the camp or played in the game or all that stuff. But I got to know them because they were a family that was a family. They were all together, and I understood what they were going through. And for your audience, what they were going through, Felipe had a chance to earn. He couldn't go to the ABA or the NBA or all that because of all the rules at that time. But Europe was paying. And that was something that could have happened. Why did I know that? Because of camp, because now I'm, around a lot of kids. A lot of these people understood me, the scouts and all that. And I saw the talent he had at the first time I ever watched him at the first camp or whatever, Mark. I said to them, and I would go to their house and tell the brothers, the sister, everybody, I'd explain to them that they basically should take this money. It was going to be guaranteed. It was a lot of money at that time, so, always is. But the great part about it, Mark, and what you're alluding to is they were a family. And they were caught up because you eventually lost them to St. John's. And the only reason that happened, if you would have been in, I know this for a fact, and we never discussed it. If he'd have been living, somewhere in LA, he would have gone to UCLA. And again, if you put everything together at that time, St. John's, they had a good year this year, was doing well and all that sort of stuff. Louis was the coach, and it was New York. But if you're back at UCLA at that time, it's still pretty goddamn good. I mean, so to go to my point here is the family sort of voted, and they wanted to complete the Dominican dream. They wanted their son to go to college. They wanted him to meet other people. And they had the younger one, the sister and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. They were part of they were the community. I spent a couple of nights at a couple of those restaurants they'd take me to and all that. They were so proud of what they did with their youngest child. I remember he went back in the summer, in August, one of those years, back there. It was like God come back. I mean, I didn't go with them, but I remember them telling me, like in labor, whenever, because like I said, because I was pushing him to go until the last minute, because it was a lot of money. I don't know, it was $500,000, but whatever heck it was a hell of a lot of money in that era. Mm. And they stayed home because they were Dominican, and he was the first one to be a hero. They had a lot of baseball players down there, a lot of great athletes, but no one like Felipe could play basketball. Mm. And he was a savior. Mm. At that time, he was the most popular person in the islands. I know. So that's what happened. They just became part of Paradise.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he ended up, he didn't have a great career in the NBA, but he does have a great story, and I would encourage everybody to watch.
Yeah.
It's called The Dominican Dream. And let's shift gears real quick, Sonny, because, I had the privilege to be with Ed O'Bannon for 5 years at UCLA. He had the knee injury, and so he stayed he was there 5 years, right. Came back, led us to a national championship. But as time passed and, the NCAA, and my biggest beef, Sonny, I've said this many times, we've entered into a new era where student athletes can, be compensated now through their name, image, and likeness. And my biggest beef is the NCAA makes a ton of money and they don't share any of it with the players, and they really still don't share it with the guys. That bothers me, because the NCAA is the one who should be paying the players, period, because they're the ones making a ton of money, especially off the tournament, the NCAA tournament. But the whole genesis, like the start of, the lawsuit that ended up all the way to the Supreme Court, and I read in the book, and I didn't know this until I read the book. I'm glad I did this. But when you asked Ed O'Bannon to be the face of the lawsuit, because for those of us that know Ed, and I was able to coach Ed for 5 years, I'm not sure I've ever coached a more genuine, authentic, loving, I don't even have the words with Ed O'Bannon. He's probably one of the most special people I've ever been around in my life. Humble, but how did you in your mind, Sonny, come to bring Ed into that? And because he was such a special, not only was a National Player of the Year, Ed O'Bannon, he just was such a great, great person. Talk a little bit about kind of the genesis of that and where that all started, and how did you come to, in your mind, to approach Ed about that?
Well, Mark, this is probably the last little vision we'll have it right now. How about if I told you and your audience that Ed wasn't the first guy I went to? I went to Pearl, Washington first, to Syracuse. I went to 13 other guys. Eddie was the 15th guy I got to. Why was that so? Because wasn't so much that I knew Eddie, obviously. He was the MVP player in the Dapper Dan. He did too. Charles went. I mean, I knew the O'Bannons as well as I knew anybody. But what happened here was the greatest turn of fate ever done for me and everything I'm about, I hope. I got there. He's now the 15th. He's living with Rosa. They had a few children, I think, by that time. And I knew him well. And I still don't have a plaintiff. So we have a great law firm. We have the great people ready to go. But all those 13, 14 other kids, and I'll never forget because Pearl called me right before he passed away and said the biggest mistake he ever made, he didn't listen. I'll never forget what he said first and what a lot of other ones said. Son, I'd like to do it. It's a good idea. He said, but you know what? I might not get a job coaching. You know, my flag, my name's in the flag up there in the rafters. You know, they retired my number. All the kids had good, logical reasons. Now, we're talking a long time ago now. We're talking, 2010 and 11 when I finally got to Eddie, when we finally got into deep into the case. So all these kids, and then I go, because Eddie comes to the big time tournament one day, and he comes and we talk, and he's over there, and we rehash, and he goes over what he's been doing. Spent a little time in Europe, a little time here, a little time that, has children. It's the same Eddie O'Bannon. It's the same kid. Now we're there, and he leaves that day from the gym, and I go home, and Pammy's there with me, obviously. We go back to the hotel. I said, I'm going to ask Eddie. What are you going to ask Eddie? I'm going to ask Eddie. Now, so I'm telling you, I ain't so smart because I didn't go there first. So we go there and we do the whole things, and I tell them what we're going to do. We make phone calls. We stay in touch with he and Rosa, and Michael. We still don't have a plaintiff. We don't. We actually go home, and I fly back to spend time. And then Eddie O'Bannon says the magic thing, and what changed him, because it wasn't that day, he saw himself in the video. It changed the life of thousands of kids, and probably my life also, the ending. Then we finally get it done because he saw it happen. Eddie O'Bannon, at the end of the movie, was the most appropriate thing, and I'll say it on your show. Hope we have time. You don't edit me out of this. The best thing Sonny Vaccaro ever did in his life, other than his family and marrying Pam, okay, is the Eddie O'Bannon case. What that did for athletes. When it's all over, O'Bannon case is what she can put on my tombstone next to "I love you, Pam." But anyway, so Eddie O'Bannon is special, will always be special. And the reason we can both say that, because I don't believe I can ever say it all the time I spent, and you as a coach certainly would have had a more intimate thing. Even when he had the injury, even when he transferred from going to Vegas to thing, that was a major, major thing talked about in my book, and I'm not going to go through it here. He and his family, especially him, did it for the right reason. I'll just say it on your program. If there would have been a second choice in the first place, he would have gone to UCLA the first time, but he had this great feel for Timmy Gergerich and Tark. I mean, it was just something that kids do, Mark, you know that. That was the only reason. But that story and what Ed did to carry it on lived forever. And I talk to Ed once in a while now, and you know what? One of the most humble things he said, and he's gone on with his life, Pammy and I stay in touch. Everyone goes through me to get to him, if he'll do anything. And he was doing a lot of them early, and he did some things for me, on situations they filmed and all that. Then Eddie said one day a while ago, I got to go on I got grandchildren now. I'm happy where I'm at. I got a job that, I like. I'm helping people that really need help. He and Rosa are the supreme parents in the world, grandparents. I wish it could have been different, that he would have had opportunities. But even to this moment, that's why Eddie O'Bannon was the right choice. Vanity and self-serving was absent. It was all to do. Just so you know, we won millions of dollars and billions of dollars now paying for the mistake that these son of a guns did to these kids. But in Eddie's case, it was a class action suit. So they all won a little bit of money, but there was like 25,000 kids that if you qualified, if you played during those years that they designated for it, you all got a piece. Eddie got a few bucks. It was probably a few bucks to buy him and his wife, in addition to the house, but it didn't build the house. So what I'm saying to you, and I hope you're done asking questions because I wouldn't want it to end any other way than thank you for having me on. Thank you for asking me great questions. I hope the people read the book. It's an honest book, and I think you'll enjoy it. But Eddie O'Bannon was the best thing I ever did for others in my life.
Sonny, as we go, I want to say thank you so much, and I'm glad you said that about Ed O'Bannon. I've been around a lot of athletes, and I don't know that I've ever been around a player that's that celebrated as a player, National Player of the Year, the whole thing, national champion, that's that humble. So I love that about you. But to everybody that's listening and watching, Legends and Souls, it's an amazing book, Sonny Vaccaro's life. But Sonny, just as we kind of say goodbye, and I know you have a lot of years ahead of you. You and Pam, you got a lot of fun. I've enjoyed getting to know you so much over the year. I have great respect for you. But Sonny, you've affected so many lives. There are just so many lives that you've affected in a positive way of young people and their families. But what would you like at the end of the day people to remember Sonny Vaccaro by? What is it?
The guy was a guy like a hitchhiker. He just came around and he touched me one day, and he treated me good. That's all that's important, Mark. I mean that sincerely. I sort of made a silly remark on that, but my life is complete. My life has been wonderful. I've enjoyed being with. Who gets a chance to meet thousands of people vicariously and in person during a lifetime? Who gets a chance to witness the good and the bad, the tragics and the parties? I mean, I was put in a position somehow, Mark, that allowed me. And I hope I was able to carry my part of my life to others.
Well said, Sonny. It's well said. And you have. You're an amazing person, and I love you, and I thank you for who you are and, allowing me to be a little bit a part of your life. But you did a great job with the book. You've done a great job with your life. So, Sonny, thank you very much for being on the podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Tell everybody hello. God bless you.